You gave me the fire that will break me off, break me off, break me off, just break me off. I had to write and raise my name, because now the struggle has the faith. My fate unfolds, it's all getting clear. Lightning, the darkness wants it in. I close my face down, held it high. Forget what haunted me this time is doing alright. I never forget, I saw in your eyes. You gave me the fire that will break me off, break me off, break me off, just break me off. I never forget, I saw in your eyes. You gave me the fire that will break me out, break me out, break me out, just break me out. I never forget, I saw in your eyes. You gave me the fire that will break me out, break me out, break me out.
Go to hell and back again, then show you burns to prove I earned it. I need shots of God to gain the strength I need. I'm just a person.
I pray on my way to the liquor store that they lock the door, 'cause I'll lay in my grave if the whiskey pours like it did before. I'm scared, I send out a prayer. Can anybody hear me? Is anybody there? 'Cause honestly it hurts and every day's worse. I keep buying whiskey when all I need is church. I'll never forget, I saw in your eyes. You gave me the fire that will break me out, break me out, break me out, just break me out.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the 4th edition of The Human Race. This episode, this one is called Breaking Out of the Box, Breaking Free of Indoctrination. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And I have a great lineup here. I mean, we got some totally out there thinkers from many different ways of all of it happening, and I think this is going to be a beautiful conversation. So allow me to have my guests introduce themselves. I'm going to start with you, Bruce de Torres, my friend. How are you doing? Welcome to the Human Race Godcast, the Goodness Over Darkness podcast, presenting the human race. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, really. Thanks. It's an honor to be here, and look forward to learning what everyone's got and who everyone is, and making new friends.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us, just a quick summary of who you are?
Yeah, I'm here because basically I wrote a book. It came out this year. It's called God, School, 9/11, and JFK: The Lies That Are Killing Us and the Truth That Sets Us Free. And you can read all about it at my site, brucedtorres.com. You'll see a bunch of great reviews about it and a link to where you can get it at trineday.com, TRINEDAY.com, and also Amazon and other regular booksellers.
All right. So thank you for being here, Bruce. You have done a lot to help me understand myself. We have many conversations, and thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for being here.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you.
All right, so moving on, we got Jeff from the Shadow Band podcast. What is going on, Jeff?
Yes, sir. What's up, my friend? Happy to be here. I am the host of the Shadow Band podcast. Can be found pretty much everywhere you find podcasts, and it's mostly conspiracies, a little bit of spirituality stuff, and some mild comedy as well.
All right, Jeff. Jeff is someone I like having a good time. You know, sometimes we talk in IG or whatever. I feel like you're very chill. When we had our conversation, it was a time where I was very stressed out, and we had a conversation that made me chill and was like, "All right, just be." And it was, it actually helped me a lot after we talked. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, good, man. Thanks for having me, and I feel the same way about you. So I'm excited about this.
Awesome. And next up, Andy from the Deep Share podcast. What's going on, Andy?
What's up, everybody? Emmanuel, thank you so much for having me on. I'm the Deep Share podcast host. You can find me there where we talk about psychedelic experiences and ancient history and symbolism and religion and all that stuff. Try to stay away from the politics, but it's fun to just witness the patterns in the past so you don't have to focus on the current. You just know kind of how it's going anyway. But I love being here, man. I think this is going to be an excellent talk. Everyone here is well trained in these fields. I love it. And I think you're doing a great job on this series. It's excellent.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And you had a great series. I was on the last one called The Witness. That was awesome. Yeah, and we do the show Worship in the Storm together. So, Andy and I, we talk pretty frequently. And we always have a good time doing stuff together. And what I like about the way you see the world, this is breaking out of the box. You see the fractal nature of the world very, very strongly. So me and you can get deep onto some stuff. So
we got real deep last night was deep.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So next up, we got Dan the Manifestor. So what is going on, Dan? Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody? Oh.
I'm sorry, I just kind of cut out. Are you talking to Dan the Manifestor or Danunaki Dan?
Yeah, no, Dan the Manifestor.
All right. So I live out on a farm here in Bluffton, Georgia. So my internet connection's a little spotty, so might be popping in and out. I got to know Mr. Emmanuel Kingman from asking him to tutor me through one of his meditation sessions. I kind of like to do my own meditation, and I asked him to help me along, and we had a great experience. And after that, I got to go on his podcast and guest, so that was very cool. My first podcast appearance. I've never podcasted before. I'm a musician and became a shepherd and a farmer here in southern Georgia, and moved from New York to Georgia. I'm used to performing in not. Thank you, Emmanuel, for having me on yours. And it's just so nice to be here and having a great conversation with y'all and with such enlightened thinkers, especially Bruce, big fan. So happy to be here with y'all.
Yeah, Dan, I want to thank you for being here as well. You were my first client that hit me up through the website. So as soon as I got the website up and running, you hit me up. I think it was Zero you heard me on, right? And then,
I heard you on Sam Tripoli's.
Yeah, and then we connected, and you would send me a whole different playlist of music and all. So, we connected on many different levels, and I want to thank you for being here because you are definitely fit the mold for this. A musician turned shepherd. I mean, going from world tours to being a shepherd. I mean, that's pretty awesome. All right, so next up we got
in the mold.
No, yeah, always breaking out. Next up, we got In the Dark, coming from the darkness, from the abyss. Homie Romy, what's going on, my friend?
Hey, what's happening? Wow, super glad to be here. I build boxes for a living, so it's gonna be fun to get some relief and break them down with y'all, with everybody here. It's a true pleasure. Metaphorical boxes, I actually don't do that. But I thought it was fun to say, and then I recanted, and then now I'm here blubbering again. But yet again, happy birthday. And this is going to be such a terrific time. I'm tickled. Thank you.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. Even though you're in the dark, you have a whole setup going on. So yeah, I want to thank you for making that happen when you still have to do it from a car. But
This is perfect. I had to get away. It's funny because this episode is geared towards breaking out of the Matrix, but I'm seemingly very hooked up to a lot of Matrixy things right now. I'm at an event that I paid to get a ticket for, and just watching all these humans fully. And I just love being at these types of events. This first event I've been to since COVID has really gone off, and this is hundreds of people, and seeing these interactions really kind of just like furthers my like understanding and belief on what is fully happening in this indoctrination age that we're dipping ourselves into, dipping our toes into this I had a thought earlier too, like we seem to do something in century periods, right? There's trauma every century, there's big cataclysms every century. There's something happen, whether or not it's a physical cataclysm or it's like a societal something, and we're stepping into one, and it's just so funny to see all the things and to feel it. And anyways, I am done. Rising from the Ashes podcast, that's what we do out here, yo.
all right. So, Romy, I'll have to get you on my podcast by yourself. I definitely want to talk all that plant medicine and different, like real regular plants to grow, because I'm getting a food forest here soon. So, definitely have to bring you on to talk about all that.
Yay! I'm down.
All right. Danunaki Dan, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
Good. What's up, man? What's happening?
Not too much. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm the co-host of Rising from the Ashes, along with Roman, and I co-host another show with Andy called Roots of Creation, also with Yake Hagstrom, and that's it, man. I love to learn. I love to talk about ancient history. I love to talk about religion. So definitely like to talk about getting outside of the box.
Well, what I like about you is that me and you see things like 180, but we still like can see each other's point of view, and we bond over it because it's like the same thing, but just like the other side of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we have a lot of sort of similar I guess beliefs in a way, but then also at the same time it's like you said, it's like kind of 180 too. But so it's cool. It's cool to get a different perspective, but then still have some sort of
On some common ground.
yeah, common ground. That's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I brought everyone here, and if I'll just give briefly who I am in case anyone's here that doesn't know me, anyone in the audience. My name is Emmanuel Kingman, or Todd Armstrong. I kind of became super psychic all of a sudden, and then through an injury, I linked up with Jesus, and now I do energy work and help Jesus help people. So, and I do the podcast Goodness Over Dark Godcast, the Goodness Over Darkness podcast, and I like doing a lot of covered up history. I've been doing some stuff on that, and this series, The Human Race, is just bringing people together that are in a group, kind of like the same conversations can happen within this group, but in order to get there, there's so many different pieces. And this edition of The Human Race is really to break down the walls, break down the barriers of thinking, because all of us somehow we've broken out of old ways of thinking. And we're at this place, and I want us all to come here and tell, the types of things that we used to be indoctrinated into and how we kind of got out of it, and what we are doing to stay grounded as humans. Because once we break out of the box, I mean, you can go anywhere. That's why I was showing that video in the beginning, that cube, it was unfolding in so many different ways, right? But every time it ended up being a cross, because you end up just breaking out clean no matter what. So Danunaki Dan, do you want to start it off with what did you break free from? What was something that you were indoctrinated in that you broke free from?
Marriage.
Oh, I was not expecting that one. That is okay. So go ahead, talk about it.
Well, I mean, my microphone keeps fucking up, man. So I guess, yeah. See, I don't know what's going on with this thing.
Oh,
Hello. Hold on, let me go to somebody else real quick. Let me.
okay. All right, Andy. What is?
Hey. I would say atheism, because when I was younger, I wasn't really indoctrinated into a religion, but I had a Christian upbringing, loose. We went to church every now and then, for periods of time, it felt like, or it just got less serious. It was never a focal point in our family necessarily, but my father, more than anything, appreciated the community of it. And I think he passed that along to us, regardless of what else we got or didn't get out of the spiritual aspect of it. But I dropped off eventually because of sports, and I just wanted to spend more time doing that and, not doing, becoming confirmed or anything like that. So I just dropped out of that stuff. But that path led to questioning everything. Of course, after I quit sports, I started smoking pot and questioning everything. And it led me to all these rock star atheists that were just coming out of the woodwork in all the literature. And this was, around the same time that I started experimenting with mushrooms, acid, but not on an intense level, like not enough to really understand what I was dealing with. And so I was all into Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and all these kinds of thinkers that now when I look back after much deeper psychedelic experiences, they didn't get it at all. They didn't get it. They missed the point entirely, and they were stuck in a reductionist material world. And then later on, it seemed more obvious that there was a narrative going on that was in place, and not that these thinkers weren't independent, but that their lines of thinking had to stay on a very directed path. Otherwise, discredit, defamed, everything. That's how it goes. So once that started to happen, I don't know, it all came to fruition with psychedelics, basically seeing how fraudulent atheism really is. And it's one of the most pious forms of belief out there, in my opinion. And it seems very damaging when you look at not only on an individual level, but I like to see things fractally, as you said. And for the greater picture of our community as humans, that's exactly where, we're headed if we let these people continue, is this atheistic path that just removes any sort of meaning and spirit from the inside, from the internal experience, which to me it's very clear that they're either unaware of what's really there or they're absolutely aware.
Yeah, that's always a good question. And just so anybody knows, you feel free to jump in whenever you guys feel the need to. So, Jeff, what is something that you broke free from?
Yeah, man. Honestly, I'm kind of on the same page as Andy. Grew up, in a household that's a pretty conservative household, and we would go to church occasionally and that kind of thing. And, after leaving my parents' house and going off on my own, I was super rebellious. I was always rebellious. I was always a black sheep in life, got in a lot of trouble in school and things like that. But there was a good 10 years or something after leaving, the parents' house, where I was just doing drugs all the time, just doing whatever I wanted, just being a freaking scumbag of society, right? And materialistic, quite materialistic for a long time. And, over the course of the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, maybe, I've been really leaning a lot more into like figuring out, what life is about, trying to change perspective on things, not be so materialistic, get into spirituality and all of its different forms. Honestly, I've been questioning things my whole life. That's why I was rebellious. I never believed that school was the answer or anything like that. So I'm kind of like on both camps, where since I was a little kid, I was already questioning the authority and doing my own thing, taking my own path. But just in the last 6 or 7 years, have I really been trying to dig more into myself and, be an asset to society in some fashion, you know what I mean? Without being stuck in the material world, without being worried about, how I look and what I have and those types of things, and being just more comfortable with, who I am inside and outside. And also been trying to like help people, get out of that box as well. Just trying to help them change their perspective on life. A lot of people don't agree with a lot of the things I talk about on my show. It's all conspiracy based and things like that. But I try to always bring the debates and the arguments to a common point where it's like, hey, you just change your perspective on this one thing, whatever it is, and you can actually see how we're both right? We're all right in one way or another. It's kind of like the idea of, like my truth and your truth, which I don't necessarily fall into, but it's kind of a real thing. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at.
All right, Bruce. What did you break free from? What were you indoctrinated into?
Well, I was indoctrinated into worshiping authority, like I think most Americans, simply because of the public school experience. The most personal answer is I was stuck up my own ass. Um, I was very self-centered, and I was an actor. That's what I was studying, and that's what I was practicing, and was challenged by an actress to let your performance come out of you in response to what I'm doing. Put all your attention on me. And I said, "Oh, that sounds familiar." I'd been acting a while by then. It transformed everything. I looked at her and paid attention to her on stage as if my life depended on it. So I guess that was the moment where I discovered paying attention and being present, and then all, so much mystical, magical wonderfulness is available to us when we just pay attention and start experiencing what's really here. So that was 30 years ago. So I say the first third of my life, I practiced being an actor. For the last 30 years, I'm practicing how to be a human being, which is just to pay attention and love everyone and everything. And indoctrination. A great book is called A Course in Miracles. Marianne Williamson has had a 40-year career of empowering people, sharing its principles. And everyone here is definitely going to, if you haven't already read it, you're totally going to understand the point it makes. The major point it makes is that the idea of separation, that we're separate from the universe, we're separate from each other, is the error that leads to all the fear and hatred and competition and anxiety and depression and all the problems, and the defense of the ego and me versus you. And the consciousness of unity, of us all being something of an illusion, because there's really only one thing that exists, us, better word, love, better word, consciousness, qualities eternal and infinite. And now we're off to the races, and all you guys can pick up any part of that and, just, share what that might inspire in all you guys.
You're
Well,
speaking my language, Bruce, for sure.
See?
That's that fractal behavior right there. You know, the microcosm to the macrocosm. That one thing that we all are. It's amazing, and it's almost as if this transcendental experience, no matter which path we take to get to it, leads us to almost experiencing that level of consciousness, even for a split moment at times. And it's that's perhaps where the awe, the never-ending awe, really comes from, is that one experience. And you look at modern day religious people, they don't every day, you know, they don't normally have that experience. They go to a building and hear about the experience, and they worship the idea of the experience and Jesus or whoever, and instead of understanding the experience that someone like Jesus really is talking about. And it's beautiful once you see it.
This topic
Yeah.
kind of aligns perfectly with the research rabbit hole that I've been diving down recently, which is going through all the work of Mark Passio. His podcast began in 2010, and the whole entire crux of it is consciousness, and of all the false dogmas that are kind of held up as paragons in the society. You know, every false religion is gone. Formal religion, atheism, New Age religion, money, politics, scientism, materialism, you name it. It all goes out the window, and he breaks it down in an extremely formal way, where, you know, talking about the nature of knowledge, the nature of understanding, intuition, wisdom, truth, and just kind of packaging it into, it's essentially a university course. It's like 236 episodes. I'm up to like 40.
What's it
recently,
called?
But yeah.
What was the podcast called?
Mark Passio. His podcast is called "What on Earth is Happening."
Okay.
And
It's a great one. You should
probably
check
the
it out.
biggest knowledge dump I found on the planet.
Okay, I'm gonna definitely look that up. And
Passio with two S's, Passio.
Correct. And the show is "What on Earth is Happening." It started in 2010, and like from episode 1, the wheels are already going at 100 miles an hour. You're just on the track, and then he did his last episode maybe 2020. I've still got a long way to go.
all right. So Bruce, you said in there something that it went right off of what Jeff said, and that you switched your perception just like that, and you were doing it for pretend, and then all of a sudden it had the most profound effect on you, just switching your perception of, okay, you're viewing the world from this way, just view it from this way, and now play. And then you go see that, oh my God, I've been living life like this when all I had to do was do it like this. And it's just the most profound thing ever.
Yeah, it was a revolution. I was in my early 30s, and I started paying attention to people in real life the way that I did on stage, as if they're worth looking at, as if they're worth regarding, as if I want to be affected. I want to take in what this person is saying. I want to love them. And I sunk into years of despair, regretting the opportunities I had in the past to love and bond with people who just wanted to love me and have fun with me. But I was running all my childhood rackets and ego competition, and but the more I paid attention, and the more I read about it, I started reading about, started reading all the self-help material, how to, what is happiness and all these things. And now really my life is a meditation of trying to remember that I'm co-creating every moment. I want it to be here. I want everything that I'm experiencing, and even the things that surprise us, a hurricane or the roof collapses or something really bad, I'm trying to take it just as a maturity test. Can I love even this? Can I stay calm and loving even to this? And the more intense life gets, the more that helps, because it just does. It's all you can imagine, because you're all very, very thoughtful about life and what is existence. So you know what I'm trying to describe here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Romy, do you want to tell us what you broke free from?
Yeah, well, I mean, the great part about going after all of these beautiful people is that now there's a bunch of shit to touch up on that everybody brought up individually. Originally, I was going to go with like, I think the first thing that came to mind was jealousy. I actually, in the early part of my when I was figuring out what loving anybody is, because, when you grow up, especially here in America, in the Western states, because that's where I'm from, that's what I can reference. Growing up as, you gotta court the ladies, and you have to do it in such a way, because the more girls that like you in school, the how it goes, right? And I'm fleeting with insecurities left and right, being tossed at me, into my consciousness as a child. And so as I got older, like, there was just jealousy is just a part of growing up, I feel like. And that was one of the first big shadows that I actually like turned around and handled. And I haven't experienced it with any partners I've been with in the past like couple decades. I love and love all of that. So that was like the first kind of box punching shadow situation, indoctrination that I felt like I had like actually challenged and myself. But something that Bruce said earlier too was, the consciousness of unity, right? Like there's this, that's one of the indoctrination boxes, is like the separation, that there is a separation in us, that there is some sort of severance, some sort of disconnect, whether it's from individuals and our beloved humans, or it's plants, right? And anything. There's no severance between anything in the existence, even if it's in our minds. Like there is no severance of that. And what I vision is, there's a purpose for that, and the purpose to keep us as separate as possible, because we're so powerful and we're so magnetic, and our consciousness is the energy and the magnet of our physical vessel that can collect and connect to other people, and to make the consciousness and love and energy even stronger when it is unity. And that's what we all feel when we are open with that, and we're truly open. And there's, and talking about fractals and up is down, and the macros and micros and ins and outs and all the things, I'm punching through boxes every day. There ain't no box that I think, it's like a Russian doll box up existence is. It's like every time I think I go to bed, I wake up and there's, it's the consciousness is so folded, and it's so beautiful. I love it. It's an onion, but it's continuous work, but it's work worth working for, and I'll never stop, and we will never stop. And this is great, and thank you.
Yeah, I like what you said, jealousy. That's the outside of the box thinking that I wasn't even thinking something along those lines. And it's perfect though. I had jealousy in me as well from a past relationship. You get cheated on, and then all of a sudden you have your guard up. And what happened when I broke free is I didn't care anymore. I was at the point where I didn't care about anyone or anything. Like I literally couldn't make myself care. I went from one caring too much to, I was heartbroken, and then I wouldn't let myself get hurt, to the complete opposite end is, I don't care. I don't care enough to be in a relationship with you, because I just don't care. And it's hard to find that middle ground.
Also, it seems like jealousy is kind of a part of a bigger picture too. It's just like that inner child creating a box around itself that's comfortable to stay in and go in the cycles over and over again, instead of experiencing new things because of that fear,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Danunaki Dan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, man. So I guess like for me, the first thing, I guess was my dad passing. So I had to try to figure things out on my own and grow up fast. And so one of the things that my mom made me do was go to church. And so I kind of rebelled against the whole church thing, and then I kind of just dove into figuring out what everything is and what everything means and what religions are and the different types of religions and belief systems, and seeing just what was out there. And actually, like, I like to get a definition of what atheist is, because it's an interesting one, because to me it means that you don't believe in God or any type of creator, I guess. Is that correct? And then agnostic is like you're spiritual, but you believe that there's a creator. And I don't know if I fit into any box, because I don't think that there are any gods or a god, and I don't worship any god or gods. And I think everything is a result of the fractal nature of our own reality, and everything just grows on top of everything else. And that's why we see all these patterns, and it's like a pattern of growth. And so I don't know that I necessarily fit into any contrived box or not with that. And then what I was going with the marriage thing is, it's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of true, right? Because it is a form of indoctrination with like Disney, and how they teach girls to be princesses and expect a ring and to have all this stuff all set up, all perfect in their life. And so when something is not as perfect as what they are expecting, they have like a letdown. And then it's like, so the indoctrination of marriage, because love, I believe should have no boxes around it, right? Because if you love somebody unconditionally, and regardless of a piece of paper, which is indoctrination into the corporation, right? So that's kind of why I threw that out there. It's kind of like a gag, but also it really is part of the indoctrination process.
Yeah, well, love's limitless.
Yes.
It's supposed to know no bounds. So, yeah, I mean, I want to give mine a little bit too. What I broke free from is so many different things. I mean, I am constantly breaking free of things. If I feel like coffee has too much of a hold on me, I'll stop that shit for 30, 40 days. If I think anything, the way that I say words, if I say a certain word and I focus and realize that I'm saying it, I'll stop myself from saying it. And I can get really good at doing whatever I really want to focus my mind on. I break free from everything. When I was a kid, it was sports. That was a real big one. I mean, that was all, like, I was a big meathead. My family, this is what we did. We bonded over sports, but we knew sports very, very well. But it was now that I see how well we know it, how much of a distraction it was, taking intelligent men and focusing them on sports ball, and put your time and energy into this meaningless thing that you are worshiping men wearing jerseys, getting paid millions of dollars for what? Why are you wasting your energy? Do you know where you are? Do you know what this place is? Do you know why you're here? Is there a why you're here? So many different questions that you never ask yourself because of sports ball. And
Also, not to forget that they're just willingly signing people up to get brain injuries.
Oh yeah.
Also, it's kind of theater for war.
It's entertainment.
The circus.
Bread and circus, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was the big one for me. And then, I mean, so many things that branch off of that is your whole reality is shaped by the media and what you see on TV and in movies, and what your friends are talking about and what they're seeing on TV. So when you're a kid, you don't really know anything. Everyone just shapes you. And
Cartoons.
Yeah, that's cartoons are a huge one.
Huge.
Well,
even like commercials for cartoons and for kids television
cartoons
is like
are worse now than ever.
sugar cereals and everything, sweets and other toys to get them to ask for when they go to the store and stuff. It's pretty hardcore. And even sometimes, if you're as an adult now going back and watching some shows like Simpsons or Family Guy and stuff, you're like, holy crap, like I was listening to that as a youth, like, hey, no wonder my parents were like, maybe you shouldn't be listening to this,
right.
Dude, even just like the idea that there's commercials for 5 to 8-year-olds, you know, probably not any younger than that really, but like now seeing these commercials, I'm just like, this is an adult selling something to a child. Like, this is so weird to see now that I'm not a little kid. It's very bizarre. I'm glad we don't have cable television in my house.
It's like, how can you even think like that? Like, how can I manipulate children? Like, like what? How am I going to manipulate children today and get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Oh, I have another one. It's
Millions.
putting candy bars and stuff at the checkout line.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
Right
Yeah.
at eye level with the kids.
This just like we have been as I mean since the last mud flood, I'll say, we have been developing, you know, psychological manipulation for, I mean, I want to say centuries, since, you know, the fall of the Holy Roman Empire and to the, you know, that whole like kind of that, in my opinion, that time area is when the New World Order really started to truly come into play. Like the long con of it was like back in, you know, when you take out the calendars and you put all of the alphabets into, or, you know, the letters into one alphabet and the numerical system and such. Like that was the beginning cause of that. And it's like something as simple as putting this candy bar at the checkout line when you're like, well, I am in the checkout line, I'm gonna get out of here soon, I can't leave the line, I did want candy, I said I wasn't gonna get candy, but it's here in front of me now. And then you get it and then you eat it later and you're crying because you're like, God, I have diabetes, I forgot. And it's like, that's how fucking easy it is. We have no spine. And I think it has to do with just so much manipulation and indoctrination. Oh gosh. But you know, the love, the more love, oh, you good. Send out
Nowadays,
Five Below got me last week. I was taking my daughter Christmas shopping. Five Below or TJ Maxx, one of them. We're in line, and it's a long ass line, and I'm like, oh yeah, get that, then get that, and get that.
It's just called marketing now.
Yeah.
Some lines, like I remember the Spirit Halloween and stuff, you have to go through like several turns, and at each turn they put a bunch of little knick-knack stuff for you to buy, like coffee mugs and all kinds of other stuff. So you make those impulse buys as you're going, sitting there waiting in line looking at stuff because you have nothing else to do.
Yeah, it's funny. I had that thought as I'm grabbing it. I'm like, this is marketing genius, because I was like, I'm standing in line, I'm just gonna grab all this.
I might as well grab this as evidence.
I'm so guilty of that. That's like my biggest thing right there. I'm get caught up in that line, in those shopping line, man. I'm guilty of that.
Yeah. And the Enquirer magazine too, right? The rag magazines that are total baloney, you know, Bat Boy and everything. And you know, that's kind of where UFOs started out also. You know, it was like, oh, flying spacemen and aliens, and so it's kind of a little bit of the indoctrination too right there, is visually seeing it too, when especially as a younger kid seeing those things, because I don't really know how much National Enquirer is out there anymore, but
doesn't need to be.
That's mainstream media now.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of laid they kind of cross-legged it, like, or cross-streamed it slowly over time. They were just, okay, put the joke stuff over here, and that's look, if we were to really template out all of the facets of indoctrination that have come upon social engineering over the years, we would have a pretty sweet list. But that might be kind of fun. Maybe we could do that. Huh?
We could start with the modernization of the Smith-Mundt Act.
What's that?
It's what Obama did to the original Smith-Mundt Act, which basically eliminated propaganda on us by our own government.
Eliminated the illegality of it.
Yeah. Well, so originally the OSS could do whatever it wanted, and the CIA, and then after the Church Committee, when we found out there was like over 400 CIA members publishing in national news outlets, propaganda
Operation
and
Mockingbird.
Operation. After
Mockingbird.
that happened, then suddenly, the Smith-Mundt Act happened. I think it was only a year or two later. If I might need to be corrected there, but yeah. And so it was like, yeah, this ain't happening anymore. This can't happen. And then in 2012, among many other things, probably thousands of pages, knowing these people, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act went through, which, for more or less, put it back to the way it was before.
Yeah, I think a big thing we need to stop doing is calling it the mainstream media, start labeling it as what it is, either the corporate media or the intelligence media, because that's, it's not the mainstream at all. If you look at the numbers, now I don't know if the numbers are true, but based on the numbers they give us, the corporate media is dying. It's a dinosaur. So I think we need to start changing our words a lot too, how we frame things, how we use our language, calling it mainstream media. It's definitely corporate media or intelligence media.
Yeah, because they're always
Thank you for
reporting
that
on our
respect.
stuff now. Like, whether they're against it or for it, they have to fight again. They have to talk about all the threads that we are talking about, most of them anyway. Maybe not the far out ones yet, but they're getting there, man. And they have to. So yeah, they're trying to catch up with us. We're always the trend.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it all starts with school, the Prussian style schooling system that we have. And Bruce, you do a lot of work on, or you have done a lot of work on understanding the indoctrination of the schooling system. Do you want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a major chapter in my book, and it's revolutionary to folks who have who've done the right thing. They tried to rise up through school, get good grades, to get the corporate jobs and work in the hierarchies of corporations or the military, or even back into school itself. And like I say, it's to train us in obedience, to train us into passivity, to steal us from families who would have conversations about reality. I call school a crime against humanity, and a couple of its worst offenses are by taking us from our families of necessity, because the corporations took our parents 150 years ago into their factories and then into their cubicles. So what do you do with the kids? They're ripe for capture. So the government takes the kids, depriving the kids of being raised by their families, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents, who could tell the kid stories about who and what we, the family, are, so that by the time a kid is 7 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, they have a sense of themselves. They're not as ripe for capture by marketing. They're not as brainwashable as we've been for generations now by candy bar commercials, every other kind of commercial, cartoons that inculcate the values that have made us the weak, insecure, leadable, nervous, anxious, terrified wretches that a large percentage of Americans are, who have to escape into addictions, to anesthetize themselves, just to deal with the tsunamis of confusion and anxiety, if not neuroses, if not psychoses, if not mental illness, of feeling completely alienated and unwanted by life. Here's the solution, or an idea. It's ideal based on the past, is when kids were free range on the farm or in the villages, they handled life, whether they were fighting or playing, but also spending a certain amount of time, because this is what kids do naturally, watching the adults work and trying to help the adults work. And at some point, by the time kids were more or less in their teens, they could all be full-fledged adults and pair up and have kids and get on and leave childhood behind. It was a very natural process of handling the productive things of life. Point being, by preventing kids from handling life and watching adults work, kids can't develop a love for it. They're afraid of that kind of freedom, because until we're full-grown adults, we're trapped in this prison system. We don't want freedom. We don't trust ourselves to make decisions. We weren't allowed to make decisions. And by not letting us see adults work other than a teacher, being an authority figure is the only thing we could aspire to if you're going to play that game and try to succeed according to their rules. By not letting us see mom and dad work, dad comes home from work and he's grumpy and he can't talk, we subconsciously conclude work must be something horrible. I don't want to work. I don't want a job. I don't want a boss. Look how crappy it makes my parents feel when they come home. Oh God, do I hate school.
Yeah, well, you said a lot of great stuff in there.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone want to jump in on something? I feel free to. 'Cause
Yeah, I had a thought. You know, talking about the problem with education, and it's common to all things that we have a problem. This is this general centralization of everything. Politics, you name it. It's just the complete utter centralization of everything, and they're losing their grip on that, so they're tightening it down to try to kind of contain it. But we have right now so many options that are possible for decentralizing our lives and breaking out of this matrix. Like, you know, there's all these little intentional communities and sort of homeschool type things popping up for education. People are going and working on farms or starting their own little homesteads at home, you know, just piece by piece decentralizing the food system, decentralizing the monetary system, like just unplugging yourself out from the dollar as much as you can and using other forms of money, currency, trade, barter, whatever you have to, but just like constantly plucking yourself out of this centralized, monolithic matrix deception machine. It just we're at a very interesting time where we're able to do that and communicate at the speed that we're communicating at, and people are getting it.
I would also say too, you know, we talk about indoctrination of children in school, and then you know, homeschool's good, but then isn't that just more indoctrination? Like, when does the indoctrination stop? Because then it's going to be whatever your parents believe passed into you and indoctrinated into you, and maybe that might not necessarily be the best thing either, because you see a lot of screwed up parents too indoctrinating their kids. I watched this movie on television the other day, and it was about these two parents who were fully into religion and everything, and they locked their kids up in their bedrooms because they thought, like with chains and stuff, because they thought that going outside was going to like cause them harm, basically. And it's just craziness, you know, like it's so crazy. So once homeschools start forming, like what type of indoctrination are they going to teach them? Because now they're going to teach them something different than the indoctrination of the school. But is that really any better? Because the morals and stuff that they're going to teach might be completely wackadoodle too.
Well, yeah.
I'd like. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, look at the curriculum that they're putting in public schools now. I mean, you know, it's exactly what you're saying. And then what the other Dan, the Manifestor, was just saying too, they're clamping down on it. That's why you see the parasite class, you know, labeling parents domestic terrorists for going and questioning this curriculum that's being pushed in public schools now. So
I'd like to jump in on this too, because my wife and I are going to be homeschooling my son. And what I'm seeing in the larger communities of people that are taking on this is, I don't know if anyone else is calling it this, but, you know, homeschooling 2.0 is kind of what seems to be happening out there. And there's a million different resources for objective learning. And remember, a lot of parents like us that are trying to do this are keeping in mind, we want to teach our children how to think, not what to think. And that's what we're afraid of these types of schools and this and that. You know, that's part of it, at least. And now, of course, I think in a previous time period, you could easily have my mindset and put your kids into school. Not the best idea, in my opinion, but at the same time, you could still harbor a sense of free thought and all that if you wanted to, but now there's a lot of other factors in public schools that seem to be much more disturbing. And so that leads it down another path. But for the most part, I would say the parents that are trying to take the initiative to do homeschooling are similar to me, at least in the thinking that we're trying to teach our children how to think and to see the world in their own ways. And if we do that, my God, at 4 years old, my son is blowing my mind because of the way he's able to look at things just from his own objective or subjective perspective that I've given him, and my wife has given him the allowance and the ability to nurture and grow with, you know what I mean? And exercise in the world.
Do you know?
Go ahead.
Well, just do you, Andy? Do you know of a Dr. Bruce Lipton and his work,
Yes.
The Biology of Belief?
My wife, that's one of my wife's favorite people right there. Bruce Lipton's amazing.
Yeah, and for those who don't, he has been studied. He's in his 60s or 70s. He's awesome. He's so big-hearted and lovable, and our belief causes and creates and transforms everything in us and around us. And the Danunaki, this point that Bruce Lipton makes, that from birth until around 7 years old, he shows we're in a super learning state. Kids can learn languages, but the primary thing we learn is how people relate to each other. If you have a family, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, the power dynamics, and what are we happy about, what bums us out. So by the time we're 7 or 8, we've got these patterns. And it would be, as you said, that the indoctrination of that particular family could really be toxic or not healthy for a kid, for any particular family.
Mm-hmm.
And then, according to Bruce Lipton's model, the rest of our life, our subconscious programs are running us. Well, that's fine, because the ancient advice is know thyself. The unexamined life is not worth living. And Carl Jung, what we don't make conscious, we project onto others and then complain that it's fate. And the process of self-discovery is making the unconscious conscious. Well, what's unconscious, according to this little description? It's the habits and patterns we developed by the time we were 7 years old. I was in my 30s, and because I learned how to pay attention on stage, I learned how to pay attention in life, and I realized I was an asshole. And the litmus test for an asshole is they think he's an asshole, she's an asshole, that's an asshole thing to do, because what we see what we are, and we create, what we are, and so kids are allowed to be raised by their parents, and it's up to us as a culture. Here's the solution for the family that changed their kids up for some effed up religious beliefs. As a community and a culture, if we could comprehend the miracle that was in human history, the founding of the United States of America and the ideals of liberty and personal sovereignty, and share that's how we would evaluate each and every other, our neighbors and things like that. And that's how those kids who were raised by effed up religious parents could grow up. If we could be a community that respected the consent of the governed is required before any law is passed. And I've done a big spread here, so I'll open it up.
I think the thing that worries me most about the homeschooling aspect too is the lack of social skills development. Like if you're just homeschooling your child alone or by himself or by herself, do they have any other interaction with other children? And so to me, I think the biggest problem is that social aspect, because when they get out into the real world and try to develop careers or jobs and they don't have that social aspect, they're going to be very, what's it called?
Awkward?
Well, awkward too, but
overwhelmed.
Reclusive, I guess. They're going to try to stay to themselves rather than learn how to work with other people. And I think what we try to do is we try to say, well, let's do homeschool and let's say screw the schools. But really, isn't what we should be trying to do is change the indoctrination in schools and make the curriculum better for a learning environment? Because even if you talk about private schools, that's still a different type of indoctrination than a public school. So I mean, really what you have to do is you have to form a curriculum that teaches kids to be objective and to think for themselves, and do it in a public school forum without the government indoctrination in it. I think that is like the real goal, and not just to break off and do homeschooling here and homeschooling over there.
I
worked
think
at
you're
a,
right on.
Go
Can I
ahead,
just jump in real quick? Just to follow up with what Dan's saying, something I forgot to mention before is that another huge aspect of homeschooling 2.0 is this aspect of community, of parents getting together and doing this in groups. And I also would like to hope that that idea, that initiative among parents and smaller communities of parents doing that together could eventually, especially with everything else that's going on and this big split that's happening between society, eventually maybe we can, all of us free thinking people out there doing this in small communities, these small communities will grow and grow. While that parasite class fades and has less and less to suck off of, we will be forming that new public arena, because just like Roman was saying, I think it was Roman, there is no mainstream. That's not mainstream anymore. I think Jeff might have been saying, yeah, that's not mainstream anymore. They're fading as long as we choose to stop. So right now, I think we have to do that small community thing. We have to do the homeschooling thing, and it may not be ideal for everybody. And I know a lot of parents that just absolutely feel like they can't do it. And I want to sympathize a lot, but in a lot of ways, if I were to pick their brain, like how many things could we come up with solutions for that they could do it? I don't know. That's a very subjective thing for me,
And it's really awesome to question everything and to put that out there as the first priority of breaking out of any box. Danunaki, there was a teacher named John Taylor Gatto who then started writing books about the prison of public schooling and how harmful the public school experience is for kids. And he's quoted as saying, it takes about 50 hours to teach a kid how to read, write, and do basic math. So there's no objective reason to lock up a brand new human until they are full grown 18, 22 years old and prevent them from interacting with life or socializing with other people. In my example of the free range kids on the farm or in the small towns who are able to play, able to watch and see other people work, able to wander into, I've idealized this a little bit, wander into the blacksmith shop, and one kid gravitates and watches the anvil and the horses. Another one watches the clothing maker. Another one watches the lawyer through the window and falls in love with books and academics. Another one just keeps working on the farm. And like Andy said, his 4-year-old astonishing him. Kids are modern generations have been locked up until they're 18 or 20 because those in power and want to stay in power, they don't want their innovations. They don't want their their solutions, their amazing creative solutions to things, and compete with the markets we've got captured, and we want to just keep shoving our products down everybody's throats. Meaning when humans are free, there's no rule for how fast they rise to competency. Mozart was a virtuoso on the piano, I think, by the time he was 5 years old. In the Civil War, on both sides, there were a couple of officers in charge of 50, 75, or 100 men. The officers were 12 years old, 14 years old, because they had risen to that kind of competency that fast. So to reimagine what education could be, school might be the word to delete, because to say homeschooling and then picture 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, kids at desks sitting in front of one teacher at a blackboard. And Gatto, the author, made this huge distinction between education, which is from experience in life, versus school, which is a prison.
Well, we just got a comment here from Narlix. It says the schools in my hometown are designed by the same company that built the jails. No windows. It's very sad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly it. It's, sit down, stand in line, raise your hand, listen to authority, take your
It almost seems to
standardized
me like
test.
relying.
Yeah. It's prisoner training, it's slave training, it's good
Mhm.
employee training, and it rewards those who kiss butt, who will take abuse and give abuse to subordinates who can rise up in a hierarchy. They become the four-star generals, they become the CEOs of the corporations that sell lies and harmful drugs to people because they're going to play the game.
And yeah, I'm not saying, hey, let's all go indoctrinate our kids or anything.
Oh no,
What I'm trying to get at is spitballing these ideas out, because I think a lot of people are kind of unaware of the types of things that you can do. And I think it's good to have a conversation like this to understand those different viewpoints, because sometimes, even myself, I don't really think about all of the other aspects. Like, so to me, Bruce, like, I do have in my head that homeschooling is like, one or two children in your house, and that's what homeschooling is. So the fact that there is other possibilities, other people might not realize that either. And I think it's good to kind of explain that, because indoctrination really does start at that young age. And if we want to talk about getting out of the indoctrination, we have to start with our children and ourselves too, because we're the ones that are going to be teaching that to them. So we have to really kind of realize what aspects of all this do we want to instill.
Well, it's crazy. So I do want to say that I totally went down that line of thinking, Danunaki Dan, not too long ago, that I realized, like, no, homeschooling is now I'm just telling my daughter everything to think. And not that it can't be done in a good way. I mean, I wouldn't, I'd have to look into it in order to do it. And then I
Yeah.
realized myself, I was like, well, I broke free. And I was like, as long as I teach my daughter how to think at home, then it doesn't matter how I send her into the world. And I mean, I'm not against homeschooling either, and I love the contrast that's going on here, because I mean, this is the whole reason why we bring a bunch of free thinkers together, to get these types of ideas out there. And really what it brings to mind when Bruce is telling that wonderful image of children running from store to store watching, what that takes is parents and adults to not be stressed out. Because if you could imagine kids running in shops today, like, we're selling stuff, we're not even doing things in these shops. If we go back to, oh, I'm doing stuff in my shop and I'm not so stressed out if it's a little dirty, or there's no glass for the kids to break. It's just, you're going to learn how to do some stuff. So if we could get back to that place, which it might have been at one time, that would be wonderful. But it really takes people who aren't stressed out and aren't going to freak out when kids are running around. And the indoctrination process starts when we learn language. That is
Absolutely.
because when we don't know language, we know energy, and we can communicate with the plants, with the animals, with the trees, with the sun, with the grass. We understand life in a whole way, and we're trying to tell the babies are trying to tell the adults, and the adults are speaking some foreign language, and we're like, wait, I got to learn that language to tell them they're doing it wrong. But by the time I know the language good enough, I forget. And we do this over and over again.
I think another hard thing too for parents to wrap their head around with homeschool is it's going to take one or both parents to escape the indoctrination of the 9 to 5 also, because somebody has to be home to do that.
We're dealing with that right now, where like I'm working full time like crazy, and my wife is home with our son, and it's for like, that's not fair to my wife either, because like she's her own individual person who also needs to expand her reality in her life, and she's trying her best to do it at home right now. It's just, the past couple of years have just been nuts. And that's definitely a struggle too, where like, how strong is she in this topic or this topic, and where am I going? I'm going to have to fit myself into this as well, for sure. And but like to your point about the indoctrination starting at home, I totally agree. It's like we have to get to a place. I think this is where all these kind of conversations go. It's like, society's sick. We can't really used these amazing solutions yet because we're so fucked up right now. Like, these are not the people, this is not the, like, maybe us, but like at a large population right now in contemporary America, it's like we're not ready to take on. That's why it's so painful. This process of change is so brutal for the human race because it's really uprooting everything we're doing. It's crazy.
And a lot of the things that prevent us from making that change are these kind of old notions rooted in fear, deep rooted fear. And if we don't rip
And
those
anger.
up by the roots, we're just going to keep falling back into the same monolithic control system.
And this is, obvious to think about, well, what we would like is to try to identify some ideal or goal kind of conditions to kind of work toward. And for us, it's great to imagine or reflect and find, well, what worked naturally? Emmanuel, you described kids before language. Well, that's very common in indigenous societies and tribes, very, very close to nature. And that's where I get a lot of my ideas that from research, but also thinking through what I've seen of kids, how naturally kids are curious. Children learn by satisfying curiosity. Well, that follows being free to see someone work and ask, why are you doing it that way? Why are you doing it that way? Trying to help. And also another ideal, if not idyllic, scenario to try to aspire for, or to somehow model with the best that we can in the tribal original formations of societies. Everyone was all around, and what I see is in those conditions, the men and women of prime adulthood did the work. The parents did the hardest labor all day long. Women typically with the domestic concerns of the clothing and the food and taking care of just the homestead, and men perhaps out in the field and perhaps with the animals, and the infants and the toddlers and the babies in the hands of grandparents, the elderly, who couldn't plow a field or haul the water. So you've got this, that was your daycare. It was for generations, and in all cultures and societies, babies and children were spent the bulk of the day in the laps and in the hands of their grandparents, and absorbing conversation with them, and the grandparents could be silly with them, and also little life lessons like, that's sharp. That's an indoctrination that's worth giving your kid. That's fire. It's just some basic things like that. And then if we do set them free to watch us and help us work, and let them make decisions, that's the gold standard. To develop a human being is to let them make decisions, because that's where we develop a sense of power, and we're not neurotically freaked out by life. We're not, and yet these idyllic or ideal situations, yes, are so far from modern America because of our history of the last 100 and 150 years of societal control by the money powers to mess us up, to raise us with media and school, and to separate us as families and as communities. We've got a huge work cut out for us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too about the grandparents, and because now kind of in society we don't really have that respect for them that we did a generation ago, where it, like, the grandparents were the ones. Like, for me, I have no dad, and my mom lives with my sister, so I have no grandparents to rely on for that type of thing. And so it's really beneficial for the children to learn from their grandparents also, because they've been around and they have that wisdom already that they carry and that they can share. And I think that's kind of a big part missing in most of society. I wouldn't say all of society. I know that there are people that have really close relationships with their grandparents, but that goes into the home too, right? And having a mother and a father in the home, and not just a single parent household. and how to overcome that. And then one of the other things that Andy was talking about of homeschooling is like, how many conversations have you guys had with other people and you're just like, oh, you have no fucking brains? Like how hard is it to have like one of these types of conversations with a normal person outside, and then they're going to be homeschooling their kids? Like, holy shit, that's almost scarier.
Some of the hardest conversations I try to have are with people who are the most quote unquote educated, right? So I just watched this documentary, excuse me, last night called Alpinist, and it's about the solo climber Marc-Andre Leclerc. And his mom says that she homeschooled him and they would only do basic schooling until like noon, and then she would just let him run out in the woods all day long. And if you watch that movie, you can see how happy this dude really is. He lives in a tent with his girlfriend. No cell phone, nothing. His whole life is just climbing these cliff faces, but he's the happiest person in the world. And I think that it goes back to what Todd was saying, that, you know, getting out and just like experiencing what, you know, like our ancestors were experiencing, which is just nature, right? Like that is way more important and beneficial for the development of somebody than any kind of curriculum that some suits came up with. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And that goes into the problem with like the fact that once you teach a child in that fashion, we have this society that doesn't appreciate that. So we're broken in that sense right now. And that's kind of where I was leading with that. You know, it's this is a transition period where nothing fits right now, at least the way it used to.
Yeah, it's when we start talking about what Bruce was saying, you know, are we a selfless enough society to take care of the elderly, and we do these things, like we work for them? Are we selfless enough to just help others because they need help at this time, and we know that at some point we will need help as well, and we just, instead of putting our money into, you know, trading our energy for money and putting this money in some trusted, quote unquote, trusted place, what if we just, you know, you need your car fixed? I know how to fix a car. Okay, I'll do that. Are we selfless enough to do that? Or is the selfishness part of the indoctrination?
Well,
Solid question.
I want to pick up on what thoughts I got when Jeff was describing what he just said, that climber who was allowed to be in nature after lunch, after noon, that is of such primary importance to handle reality. And Emmanuel, you've also talked about, you know, the kids before language. Out in nature, we realize we connect with nature. And so much of the Native American traditions and wisdom is all about, if you listen, nature will talk to you. And it's about discovering the spiritual nature of reality and existence. And that, as a foundation or a concept, until it's personal to somebody, once it's personal in some way, shape, or form, you've got the beginning of a spiritual imagination. And then you add to that, why do I think what I think? You can discover your mental habits, you can discover your indoctrination, and you can start to set yourself free from wherever you are right now today on the planet, whatever country you're in, however old you are, if you're in your 20s or if, you know, I'm about to be 60, you can wake the F up if you can develop a spiritual imagination, which is infinite in its implications. And you can go to the back of my book and find a lot of books to read and a lot of sources to help you develop that. And then also wake up to your own habitual thoughts and your indoctrination, whatever it takes to help you fall in love with reality, because life shouldn't be this hard. It's hard to us who've been modernized and raised by indoctrination, raised to be alienated from each other, raised to be insecure and terrified of our own inability to handle life. You know, that's what's at stake, which is ultimately peace and happiness. It's health, freedom, peace, and happiness.
Health, freedom.
How do we create that? If we could hang those as goals, we'll get someplace.
Yeah, I was
Roman,
gonna.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I would kind of like to go around and just get a one word answer from everybody in what do you think is crucial to teach children? What aspects of life are beneficial to them in the future that we need to focus on teaching them?
God.
Is that crucial? Is that going to
That's
get
the number
you?
one thing.
Is that going to help you survive?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
absolutely. It's. I mean,
I
once
mean,
we
I've
have.
survived without it. I'm 40 years
Well,
old.
you
I haven't had it, have
you
it,
may,
and I'm
so you may
alive.
think it at the moment, but without God, we wouldn't be able to do any of the things we do. To know that there's something more than ourselves is like getting in touch with the Creator when we're struggling is the most important thing we can do in life, and life is nothing but struggles. And
See,
even though I understand you're saying you did it without what your when I say the word God, what your perception of that word is, you're still not doing it without God, because you do understand that there is something there that you uh, you understand there's more than just this existence, and what's in front of your face isn't the only thing. So when I say the word God, that gives a perception, but however you can understand it, it is understanding that there is something that we're here for. There's something going on that is more grand than we are.
uh,
So would humility be kind of
yeah, because I
maybe
would say that
a
would be
little point?
another. I would say God would be another form of indoctrination. So being humble about the universe is greater than you. I could understand that aspect.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying, and you're coming from someone who was, the church did some stuff too, but I'm not even talking in a Christian sense at all. I'm not a Christian at all, but I did want to get to Roman a little bit first. We can definitely go around the table with that question, but I wanted
Yeah.
to get Roman's thoughts on this. He's going to have to roll out here in a few minutes, but on all the different stuff that's been talked about here, Romy, what's your take on it?
I used to teach kids actually. I worked at a it was a really kind of like what the public school would call unorthodox school. It was an outdoor survival school where we had full-time programs for kids year-round school, and then we also had homeschool programs. So we would take different groups of all ages, and they would be all homeschool kids, and their parents basically have them on a rotation where they would do things at home one day a week, they would do so on and so forth. But our focus was always nature, and it was ancestral skills, hide tanning, fire starting, foraging, alchemy, and all of the things, and blacksmith, and
Yes.
so much, just so much. And so it's out there. And the one thing that we really focused on, that our whole motto of Trackers, it was called Trackers, the school, is called autodidactic. And autodidactic learning is basically where you let the kids lead their schooling with their beautiful thought process, and you're there, and you are the teacher, you are the person, you are the adult there in that situation, but you're allowing the kids to kind of create their own curriculum through their just pure ingenuity, and allowing them to actually have critical thinking, and allowing that. And so that's really important, putting kids in positions to let themselves critically think, and have and to be able to interact with nature, but then also have uh deep philosophical and theosophical um breakthroughs, because kids will blow your mind with philosophy sometimes when you allow them and you give them the grounds to. They will say some stuff where you're just like, I needed that, I needed you to say that, and wow, my mind is blown. I will sit here and make you your box of mac and cheese, you tiny little mutant.
Romy,
um,
how long did you do that?
I for about 4.5 years, and then I I was actually in my early to mid 20s, and I just had to step away because I felt like I was still in my youth, and that I was it was really, really, honestly, it was a crazy experience because I was teaching and like almost putting on this, facade that I was an educator, but I still felt like I needed to learn so much.
Did you
And
go
kids,
through public school?
oh, absolutely. I
Okay.
did get kicked out of school in 8th grade, and had to go to a Seventh-day Adventist school.
For the
Uh,
remainder through senior year?
no, just for 2 years in 8th and 9th grade, and that only had 8 kids in that school. It was 7-day Adventist. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about that branch of Christianity in those 2 years.
Well, it sounds like that's a pretty awesome thing that you were doing. It sounds like you were a big kid, and that is kind of what kids need in order to do that. It's like you're having a good time with them, and you're like, all right, what do you want to explore, and encourage that type of behavior. That sounds awesome.
One of the greatest jobs I've ever had. They allowed me, and it was almost like I was the child with the autodidactic curriculum creation because I was young. I almost faked it till I maked it with these people because I had no experience. My experience was only, me doing things in the woods and having kind of a little bit of bushcraft knowledge, and then food. I mainly got hired on as a cook, but then I worked my way up to like teaching stuff because it just happened kind of naturally, and I really wanted to do it also. And so, but it was funny because they were just basically like someone with very little experience, but I had hands-on experience. They were just like, create a curriculum. I was like, what does a curriculum need to be? What they're just like, just do it, and we're going to check in, we're going to do all this stuff. And it wasn't aloof, it wasn't mismanagement. Actually, they were very, very, very well managed. It was
And
just really
they're
beautiful.
wise enough to see your good heart and to recognize your goodness as a human being. There's a lot of credentialed professors out there, educators, who are miserable human beings who have no sensitivity or care for the precious young students that they're in charge of.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to be and to share that experience, because that's what you're doing, is you're creating an energetical environment with these people these humans that are going to be a part of your life forever. They're going to be a part of your life forever. And here's something else to touch up on too, y'all, is, we did bash the public school system a lot, but there are some really, really, really great people who get into being teachers
And make no
and
money.
make no money. And it's that's where we get in these conundrums, because the
Mhm.
social engineering through the manipulation, the psychological manipulation that's been being basically blanketed over us for years, has basically, one of the main things is, we are emotional people. So when they tie emotions into it, they know that that's going to fuck with us the most, and we'll have moral conundrums about it because we love so much. And so that's one of the big parts of manipulation and indoctrination, is to make sure there's a lot of emotion involved, so then people have mixed
Mhm.
feelings and conundrums about it.
Yeah, keep them stuck in one of those states, because there's a spiritual state, then the mental state, then the emotional state, then the physical state. So we have all those stages to go through before something physically happens to us. You deal with it spiritually first. If you don't deal with it, then it's a mental thing, then it's an emotional. And if they can get you to react on an emotional level, then you're stuck. If you're reacting from an emotional state, that is programmed behavior. Then that's the imposter you that is programmed to react in a certain way. It's no longer the spiritual you that fills the body that you're in. You're reacting closer and closer to an egotistical caveman.
Can I, since you mentioned spiritual, and Danunaki said, you don't, you've lived 40 years without quote unquote God, but yet
Mhm.
you talked about the fractal nature of reality, or echoed it, or
Right.
commented favorably on it. What do you know about the implications of quantum physics about consciousness as the realm in which all experience is happening?
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I don't need to put a God title onto that or a
No.
Yeah,
creator
don't
title.
personalize it. You don't even have to personalize it, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, see, for me, it's the personal relationship is what saved my life. The personal relationship, knowing that I can talk to the creator of this entire thing. And if I do the things that are my conscience tell me are good, then he'll reward me for it. That is the most profound thing that somebody can know, that they can control the outcome in their universe if they just listen to their conscience. If they
I
can grow their conscience and become a good person and listen to it, that's what quote unquote manifesting is, without some entity doing it for you that you have to repay later on in some way that you don't know. You can actually just do the creator's will and all of a sudden have the most beautiful life. And it's the most simple pleasures that you get, is like recognizing that a Saturday with my wife and my daughter going to the mall might be the most beautiful experience ever, when before it would have been a drag because, I got to go somewhere for someone else. I got to do this selfishness. Hey, you got to head out, Romy?
see you, Romy.
Bye. Thank you guys. I
Yeah,
didn't mean to interrupt, but I do
No worries.
apologize. Thank you guys.
See you
See you
Bye.
later,
bro.
brother.
Yeah,
Great to
take
meet
it
you.
easy.
Yeah, let me clarify. I didn't mean personalize. Better word would be personify.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't think the personification into humanizing or
Right.
you don't have to do that. I think it's completely legitimate to do that and to not do that. You know how I feel. Most of you do. So
Mhm.
that's where I come from. I think you don't have to the personal relationship though. Absolutely. Absolutely. It goes all the way to the absolute depths, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
And
it's so personal that quantum physics implies, and mystics have described for since the beginning of time, that our intentions influence what we experience. So,
Yes.
Danunaki, I just submit to you the field of consciousness that has this fractal nature, which also has the holographic nature, which means that all the entire nature of the entire infinite reality that exists shows up entirely in each and every part. So like Emmanuel is describing the creator, and Emmanuel well described kind of co-creating with the creator. I submit that each one of us is the creator. There's nothing but the creator, and there is a mystery. And this is the fun of why and how this one thing that exists that seems to be infinite and seems to be eternal, that the best words can say it, it's a field of consciousness, can appear to itself as me facing this computer and as you facing your computer, when in reality, when we look in the eyes of someone else who's conscious and wants to be seen, what we feel, this is what falling in love is. It's experiencing what's real, which is the only thing that exists, love. Love is the creator. You are love. You are the creator. And with that spiritual imagination working, we can start to see, it's when I judge and hate Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and Henry Kissinger and the New World Order that I become like them. To hate and separate and judge and think I'm better than anything else. And it's a lot of work, and it's very mysterious, and it's time for me to hear what you guys have to say about all of the above.
Yeah, and I would say that I agree with you in that. What I'm saying is the whole personification of a god man or a god being. I don't need to have that in order to connect spiritually to consciousness. I can connect spiritually to consciousness without calling it God, and still have a
Right.
deep, meaningful experience in life, and still manifest, and still have spirituality, and still believe in myself, and give myself power and energy, and also be good to other people without having a god above me that I need to pray to and worship or believe in, when I can just have all that without having to put my energy into something else and putting it into myself and my own life.
Right. So that's
And
what I meant,
I
all
feel
that
you
stuff
there.
when I said God. That's when I teach my daughter about God. I don't I don't go to church myself. Jesus Christ has saved my life, but I don't go to church. I just recently started reading the Bible, and actually, I had a very profound thing that maybe I'll touch on later in the show if we get to it. But like when I tell my daughter about God, I tell her you can have a personal relationship when things aren't going good. You can talk just out loud. You don't have to talk to anybody at all. Just get that energy out of you. And I teach her the fractal nature of reality, and I teach her how she's making things happen with the way she reacts and the way that she thinks of things and she's perceiving it. That's what I mean when I say God, because God isn't just, some people have that perception that you were having. So, it's good to clarify that
No,
it's the energy essence of
yes.
the life force, the spirit of everything, and how it is all connected the way Bruce is describing.
And I would 100% agree with
Yeah.
that statement.
So the
Yes.
word God just means that's the first word for father, in my opinion. That whoever the first father was, we use the word God, and it was the spirit.
But see,
And
why does it have to be a father? Why does it have to be humanized? Why can't it
well,
just
because everything's
be a
male and female. The
expression?
male always fits in the female. If you take a pipe, a puzzle piece, anything, it's always male fills the female.
I
It's
think
also more
many
of
of
a
us.
concept of what came before. You were talking about what's above us. It's also the previous fractal, if you will.
Yeah.
It's
The ancestry, the
Yeah.
ancestral spirits.
I think
Yeah.
many people, and a lot of people, especially in this community, have like this initial visceral reaction to the word God. It's something that I dealt with for a long time, and I was telling you this, Todd, on your show last time with you. It's, for me, it's what we're saying here is essentially that there is some higher intelligence or consciousness, like the old Hermetic saying that the mind is all and the all is mind. That could mean that we're all individually this creation or creator, right? Co-creating at the same time. Or maybe it is some dude in the clouds, who knows? But I think that we all have some understanding that there is some higher level of consciousness, call it the
Yeah.
architect. I like to use the word architect because the Matrix movies, but
Yeah, Dan the Manifestor, are you hopping in? Did you
Yeah,
break up?
I'm sorry. I'm probably dealing with a lot of internet issues on the farm here. But if you want to even depersonalize that a little bit further, you can just call it like the randomness of nature, things that we don't control, and then our free will, the two things, the thing that we do control, and finding the balance in between the two. Like it's not all about the randomness or the creator. It's not all about our free will and us just doing what we want. There's something in the middle and they're divinely connected.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And what Jeff was saying is that when you see the image of God, this is what we talked about, that you saw it in a psychedelic trip. You saw the image of God and you didn't want to give him a name. But it doesn't matter what we actually call it. When we see the image of God, we know it. I mean, it's just, I've seen it several times and I'm like, oh, that's God.
yeah, it's
Oh,
just the feeling of complete bliss and nirvana. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the
Yeah.
face that I saw in that trip wasn't defined enough for me to say it was any person or whatever. And Nico from Upstate Unconventional even suggested maybe you were seeing yourself. And I was like, well, maybe you're right. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that I was going to say that right when you hopped in. I was going to say I also saw it as, oh, that's me. That's the first thought I had when I saw Jesus in my first psychedelic trip. I was like, oh, that's God. I know this is God right now in front of me. This is crazy. I'm looking at God. Then when I saw him in my clouds, I said, oh, that's me. That was my first thought. Then I was like, oh, that's Jesus. Then later on, I'm like, oh, that's both, because Jesus is coming through me because we are all the same, and that's just the Creator's name. And so what I was reading, everyone kept telling me start to read the Gospel of John, see what happens, see if the Bible speaks to you. And I read it, and what I'm reading is that John became Christ. John is not talking about watching a man named Jesus. He's talking about himself becoming Jesus. And this is probably what Matthew, Mark, and Luke are about too, is them becoming Jesus, all at the same time, all recorded at the similar time in history, and they all became kings of their lands. and they said, my king is Jesus Christ, and that's why Jesus is now the King of Kings. And if anybody picks up the Gospel of John and starts reading it as if it is John talking about his transformation into Jesus Christ, then you will start to understand it, because I could write what John wrote as in what was happening from Todd to Emmanuel. It's the same exact thing.
So you guys are all talking about drugs and having hallucinations. So
Well, meditations as well.
to me, obviously,
hallucination, though.
that automatically is saying that, you know, you're having hallucinations about what God is. And so
Well, what
you're
defines a hallucination, though?
conceptualizing it based on your own experiences, which is why drugs are kind of a problem when you want to talk about spirituality, because you're not getting there on your own merit. You're getting there through some other tool that you're
Through
using.
nature. It was
this is
mushrooms. I don't
why-
know if that's a drug, but I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Plus,
But-
also, this is why all the hippies took off to India to do it without the
But
drugs.
this is also why a lot of people will go, "Oh, you saw drugs when you saw those aliens? Okay, well then aliens aren't real."
Right,
Fair
but
enough, we're
drugs
hallucinating
aren't.
right now too.
Yeah, drugs aren't. I mean, that's a term.
Touche,
Just like the word
yes.
God
Yeah,
is.
we have a natural part of our brain that gives us hallucinations through the DMT from the
but
pineal
it's not
gland in our
hallucination.
brain.
So,
Yeah,
so I
you
do
also
this
have to-
without anything.
But
I
they
mean,
are-
I do the energy work. I do this without any assistance. I seen this literally in my clouds. If you go on my website, you can see pictures
And
of
Todd,
it.
and Emmanuel, you represent a lot of folks, and Jeff also, who've had trips on hallucinogenics that were so real to you that we
More
who have
real.
never taken them, right, have to kind of respect and consider, wow, there's so many folks who've had those kind of experiences. And Jeff, Danunaki, like me, I've never done a hallucinogenic. I just have to make sense out of all of those stories, which Danunaki are, to me, are very similar to people who died and came back and described what they experienced on the other side, who similarly say, that was more real than this. And they don't have the words to describe because it's so much more real, and they are as convinced as folks who had good trips and learned a lot of spiritual things, that it helps me as I contemplate the spiritual nature of reality. It gives me a lot of hope to imagine, okay, what happens when I quote unquote die? That we're all always okay. This is something like Bill Hicks, the comedian, said, it's just a ride. And how we choose to take everything determines what everything is to us. You follow. You've had these conversations.
It's our perception. Yeah, exactly. So I can dream, and I can have a very real dream and think that it actually happened, but once I wake up, I realize it was a hallucination. So that's.
Can I quote Dumbledore?
We've been waiting.
When Harry asks,
Finally.
"Is this really happening, or is this just in my head?" And Dumbledore said, "Harry, whatever gave you the idea that just because it's in your head, it isn't really happening?"
Right.
And the thing is, this whole physical existence that we're playing out is a hallucination also, and we're proving that in science. And I wanted to also say on the chemistry side of things is that our brain has these receptors for these chemicals already, right? The physical brain is anticipating this chemical, and many scientists would suggest, and I know that they have evidence to back it up, to suggest that the brain is allowing, or these chemicals allow the brain to do something it already has the power to do,
or that the brain evolved ingesting this through the beginning of time, which is why the demonization of cannabis and the other, all the mushrooms, it's to make us slaves to the five senses reality and the fear of scarcity, and not knowing that, and I contend this, I make the case in my book, doesn't have to be true, makes my life fun, makes me being fun. I say that this is a completely spiritual and creative realm, period. There's thoughts become things, thoughts are things. Everything we experience, it's just a thought.
Yeah, we are thoughts.
You can manifest those thoughts into reality for sure. 100%.
And this is what the psycho-oligarchs, the elite of the elite, know, and this is what they want to prevent us from knowing. And this is the truth that sets us free. It's the quote unquote truth of reality in our existence.
Right. They don't want us to dissolve the walls, because that's what psychedelics do. It breaks us free of the box, that it's not doing anything to our brains. It's not adding anything in. It's actually taking away things, blocks that are put up so that we can be human. I've done many psychedelic trips. I mean, I talked about on Andy's roundtable, and his roundtables, his series, The Witness, is really all about all the different angles. And me being an energy worker, I do these things without doing any drugs. I mean, you can talk to Dan the Manifestor if I did good with him and helping him see things that I experienced what he was experiencing at the same time. This is just what happens when we breathe and close our eyes, because I'm tapped into the other world, because my brain is now going through the ether. I'm connected to the larger energy
radio station.
You're also describing hypnosis. You're also describing the joy of the hypnotic effect we can have on each other when we try to seduce each other as individuals, or when we go to a play and it's a transcendent experience because of the connection between the characters on stage and the audience. And obviously with music, especially live music, it reveals what's really going on. Or even that quiet moment alone in the woods, and all of a sudden the landscape and the trees and the shadows and the light and the breeze and the birds tweeting all line up in a way where someone gets enlightened and they realize, I am he as you are he, we are all one, and it's just love. And you can have a different life going forward, knowing these kind of things, imagining these kind of things.
Yeah.
And Dan, to your point also, like, yes, like there's the problem is when the person takes lots of acid, comes back and says, I'm Jesus Christ. No, you're not. I said, I am. No one else is. Like the person that goes off on idolatry, you know what I mean? The people that jump off of buildings because they think it's all a dream or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's definitely that involved because we lack the training. This goes back to our culture.
Right. Yeah. But, and I also think that too, because our ancestors have been doing drugs for so long, such as mushrooms and cannabis and everything, we developed these inhibitors in our body to intensify the experiences, because we have been so accustomed to doing these things over and over in rituals.
Well, what if we just
and everything else?
What if it was already connected and we've just lost it?
I mean,
and we need to now take the drugs in order to reach that state.
You're describing right now the balance between a masculine and an intellectual viewpoint and skills versus the intuitive / typically known traditionally as the feminine balance. And we've just in the West for the last 1,000 years have hyper developed the masculine patriarchal just analysis, the factual analysis of facts and figures, which serves a lot of sciences, but it's what has distorted and twisted the world into the horrible shape it's in by denigrating the intuitive and the spiritual skills, or if not sensitivities and senses and awarenesses that we can have.
Yeah, this is a great conversation so far. I did want to bring it back to, and Jeff, I want to get your opinion on this before you roll out here, is so when Bruce was talking, you know, he said 100 to 150 years ago, they started this schooling type of indoctrination where they're pushing us all into the school. Now, what was happening before that? We are now uncovering with this quote unquote Tartaria stuff is that the incubator babies and the orphan trains. So what did they work to death these kids so that they were miserable, so that then when they raised children, they saw how miserable they were, so that the children weren't just in a free, you know, in a marketplace learning all these things anymore. Maybe now it's get these kids out of here. You know, they're really pissing us off. Get them into a place where they can learn about this together. did that start to take over because they were working kids to death? What's anyone's take on that?
Yeah. So when I think about this kind of thing, I think about something that's happening like recently. Going back to what Bruce was talking about with the World Economic Forum, they just put out the Great Narrative to go along with the Great Reset, and in the Great Narrative, they talk about the world needs a new narrative. Excuse me, it's going to be brought on using technology, right? And that just makes me think of what was going on after, whether it was the mud flood or whatever it was, but in this time frame you're talking about with like these orphan trains, I think that at that time they were pumping out the last new great narrative, right? So I think that, maybe that what you're saying is the case. Maybe they just, work these kids to the point to where they would just indoctrinate their own kids and the next generation and so on and so forth, and we get another 100 or 200 years down the road of being in this type of indoctrination or control, and it's not all necessarily coming from directly from like the parasite class or the people who have set up these systems, but it actually comes from people like our parents and our grandparents who indoctrinate us without even knowing it. And I think that we're actually getting ready to see another phase of this with this other great narrative, where you're going to see all these kids now that are just getting hella screen time, and they're not going outside, and they're being indoctrinated in this new religion of scientism, right? And I think that we're literally at the beginning stages of the same thing that was happening back then.
In 1832, the Order of Skull and Bones was formed at Yale University, and they went out generation after year after year into infiltrating the major institutions and creating the major institutions of American society. Medical, very importantly; education, very importantly; culture, media, very, very importantly;
pharma.
And Rockefeller funding medicinal and school education, medical education, to demonize homeopathic and the
Yes.
natural remedies that had us connected to nature and had us connected to the organic way that we function, to bring us into this regimented school system of worshiping technology. Now, fast forward to exactly where we are today, the horrific future being created for us at the hands of these psychopaths. They're nothing less than psychopaths.
So what I would say is, when we're talking about the spirituality part, I would say that is health. Ancient health is spirituality, and realizing your spirituality and you're healing your own body and keeping that in tune by releasing these negative energies from your chakras and being in tune with nature and your surroundings around you, I think is health and spirituality at the same time. And I think we've lost that aspect in life, and we see that a lot now, as a lot of people are doing that return to nature because they're trying to get away from the indoctrination of society. And so I hope that we do go back to that aspect of spiritual health and wealth in that sense. But again, like, I don't think that we need to have this idea or conception of religion to be able to get there. We can get there on our own, and through these different ancient practices that we see in like Eastern practices of belief systems, where it's about tuning yourself and enlightening yourself to reach that next level of being. Because by having a cleansed body and by perfecting that, you reach that next level of enlightenment and are able to go into possibly, who knows what realm we go into after this reality.
So do you think it's the poisons by these psychopaths that have really taken away our health, that maybe now we need the drugs?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I was saying, maybe our DNA used to hold stronger chemical balances where we wouldn't need to do mushrooms or whatever in order to get in touch with the energy. That is it, all the poisons?
The poisons are
yeah,
a huge part of it. Our disconnect from nature and the unhealthy quality of nature and where our food is grown, we're far from the kind of health that Danunaki was describing as a result of being integrated with nature.
Yes.
To work toward an ideal would be great.
I think spiritual medicine is a lot different than pharma medicine. Like the pharma medicine is completely different than like mushrooms or marijuana or ayahuasca even, you know. It's like a totally different level because it's a band-aid for the situation. It's just putting like a little band-aid here. Oh, you have pain? Here, take this pill. Let's cover up the pain instead of fixing what's actually wrong. And I think in spirituality is you actually need to fix yourself and what's wrong with yourself in order to overcome those
That's
obstacles.
really good
also,
analogy.
And a huge part of that, Danunaki, is noticing the effect of our thoughts and what we dwell on our state, on our stress, and our anxiety, because that walks right into the diseases we can experience. And that's what I would give anyone who's got a problem, who doesn't understand at all the concept of a spiritual imagination or a spiritual quality to life. Say, fine, sir, ma'am, just start with recognizing your suffering. To what degree, you tell me, to what degree is your suffering caused by what you think about what you think is causing you to suffer? It's what we think and what we're dwelling on. And of course, the oligarchs, the psychopaths who have indoctrinated us and captured us and want us raised by screens and have a new narrative that's just involved with technology, fire hose reasons to be shit scared exclusively, because then we will follow leaders a lot quicker if we're just terrified. Tell me what to do. That's what they've done to the world and what they're doing it. Right. It's trauma-based
fear is the
mind
ultimate
control.
evil.
Yeah. And that's a reflection of their souls. That's a reflection of who and what they are, because they're not owning that what they do to us, they're doing to themselves. They think that they're separate, that they could control and hurt us and get away scot-free. And they've trained us all they're trying to train us all. The result of ingesting their content is to be terrified of each other and think it's me against the world. So I'll either violently abuse and take advantage of others to steal what I need, or I'm just going to check out with drugs and alcohol into a stupor, which is just a slow suicide, or I'm literally going to kill myself, which is skyrocketing at epic proportions for the last 20 years. And really spiking in the wake of the illness that can't be named over the last 2 years.
Yeah, one video that got removed was Bruce and I talking.
I think pharma is the drug for people that can't cope, and hallucinogenics are for the people that want to experience what life actually is.
Absolutely. The pharma stuff is, you said it was to Band-Aid, to cover up.
Yeah.
And there's our fractal nature, right? Because that's what the whole world does about everything. This system teaches us to just repress everything. Forget about it. Don't analyze it. Don't heal from it. Don't grow from it. And
Well,
I gotta get going.
Cheap, easy fix. Oh, there's a pill for that.
Yeah,
so
like
training your dog and throwing him a dog treat when he sits down. Here you go. Here's a treat.
It's designed to using their terms, it's designed for cures, and getting into the word manipulation and changing our language. Curing is to preserve. So there's no healing. It's just to preserve your illnesses,
Absolutely. So I got to get going, guys. I just wanted to say that this has been absolutely amazing. I've had one hell of a time with all of you, and I'd love to have, I've already talked to most of you anyway, but Jeff, you and I got to do a show together, and Bruce, I'd love to have you.
Yeah, likewise, Jeff.
Emmanuel mentioned my Witness miniseries, and going forward into the new year, I'm going to be turning that into a premium channel with some really intense conversations focused specifically around these topics. So I'd love to have you on for that at some point.
Yeah, I'd like to have a conversation with you.
Oh, yeah, you'll be on there.
Hey, Andy, before you go,
love to.
Awesome. Yeah. So before you go, because we're all about to wrap up here, do you want to give one, and I want everyone to try to do this, one little solution, or maybe not solution, but one type of thing in order to help the world not be indoctrinated? What is one thing that you would like to do? What do you feel is best to do in order to unindoctrinate the world?
Well, I've been saying as a joke that I'm raising a little John Connor from Terminator, but on the less negative,
sure you
violent
are.
imagery of that, without putting that kind of comedic side to it, I'm trying to raise the next generation on, from my own perspective, and hopefully I think that's where it has to start. It has to start in the home. If you are sane enough to capably do it, and we're not crazies that are going to go off and do ridiculous, horrible things, hopefully we can foster a better generation. And I think the problem, a bigger problem, is that our parents' generation, most of our parents at least, my dad is just a few years older than Bruce, so that generation, I commend Bruce for being one of even more few of his generation than there are in our generation of people that notice this about life and see it all, because the indoctrination really starts with your parents. It really does. And those older generations have been hit so viciously. So I think our generation is the most crucial thing we can do is break generational curses. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what my wife and I are trying to do. And in as many ways as we can, meanwhile, trying to work within this broken transitional system, But everybody, thank you so much for having me.
And where
Emmanuel,
can everyone
Thanks,
find you,
Andy.
Andy?
I'm on Twitter at The Deep Share. I'm on Instagram at The Deep Share Podcast. Contact at thedeepshare.com is my email. If you want to reach out to me, say anything, ask me questions. If you want to come on the show. Yeah. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
And
thanks
I
for being here,
Definitely.
Andy.
Great to
Appreciate it, my
Absolutely,
friend.
bro. Good to
see
talk to you, man.
guys. Take
All
care.
right, Jeff, do you want to give, as you're going out here, do you want to give your one thing and then tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, man, appreciate it. I got two things, man. Pretty simple. First thing, going back to what I said at the very beginning of this, perception. I think changing perceptions on a lot of things is paramount. A lot of people are just dug into their ideologies or for whatever ideology that is, and I think that being able to at least understand different perspectives on things, whether it be, we were talking about what God is for a while there, like whatever that is, or your politics or anything like that. I think just understanding other perspectives and being able to change your own perspective is probably the most important thing in communication, like what we're doing here, being able to have a civilized adult conversation about things that you may or may not agree with.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. So that's pretty much all I got. And
Yeah,
go
do you
ahead.
want to tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, pretty easy. Shadow Band Podcast. I got a website, shadowbandpodcast.com. You could just search Shadow Band Podcast on pretty much any platform and find me. Patreon, Spotify, Apple. You can also find me on altmediaunited.com, actualactivist.com. That's pretty much it. I might do an OnlyFans, so keep an eye out for that. That's it.
And I think I have everybody's stuff in the comments section already, or not the comment section. I said it last night too. I mean, in the description, I should have everyone's links in there already too. So anyone listening or watching, you can go right to the comments and find everybody. And Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It was a great honor having you back. Bruce, do you have any final words for the people and where they can find you?
BruceDeTorres.com, and also at TrineDay.com. There's books. My publisher has put out about 120, 140 books in the last 20 years that the mainstream won't touch. It's an amazing curriculum about stuff behind the scenes. And there's a tab at the top that says podcast. Every week he interviews one of his authors. We've got about 70. I help him with it. I do the editing. Little 30-minute pieces where folks could just start listening to this. And
some great authors on there.
Yeah. And for all the folks that we know who poo-poo conspiracy theories, you start listening to these interviews and maybe even starting to buy the books, and there'll be more people like us who are willing to question reality and question the narrative by the corporate people that's just killing us, that's just driving us crazy, shrinking us with fear, and just trying to control us. It's the antidote, which is this, the knowledge and information that all of us love.
Yeah. And Danunaki Dan. Oh, and I do want to thank you so much, Bruce. You've been,
Thank you.
you've helped me,
Excellent.
push me in certain ways, and really made me kind of refocus. And I very much appreciate that. And I'm
An honor.
honored that you'd be here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
And Danunaki Dan, do you want to give your one thing and tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me at RFTA Podcast on Instagram. We have a link tree set up on there. You can find all our links and where you can listen to us on there. And then anything we got going on, we post on Instagram, so you can find us there. And then the one thing that I would say to really break free of the indoctrination, to say something different, is food and what we eat and what we put in our bodies. It plays a big deal in our overall health, and by going to these corporate places like McDonald's and stuff, we're only harming ourselves further. And so to escape the indoctrination, I would say just stop going to those places. Cook at home. Learn how to cook. I think that's a really big, when I was talking about what should we teach children, I think that is a big deal to teach children, is health with food and how to eat food and cook food and what you can and can't eat, and that whole aspect, because even you still see today adults that have no idea how to cook, and cooking is a vital part of survival for all humans. And so I would say that that's probably the biggest indoctrination thing, because it's so easy to fall out of that or into that trap,
And by cooking,
even myself, I do it, and so it's not like I'm like, oh, don't eat bad, because I still eat bad. And that's why I'm saying it's a hard thing to not do anymore, but you have to have that self confidence and assurance in yourself that you can do it. And I did basically quit eating fast food for about 2 or 3 years, but I have recently kind of went back to that. So I mean, it's an ongoing thing in my life.
Yeah, it's
not alone.
Yeah, definitely not. And I think what I can give you a little maybe help in stopping that when we get those urges. We in America we don't.
Water.
Well, yes, but in America we don't clear out parasites. We normally in other countries around the world, they clear out parasites. They take parasite remover, it's over the counter, natural stuff, black walnut, garlic, clove, not anything that's going to hurt you. And you take that and it clears out parasites. And I got to tell you, every time I do it, I just feel a sense of control over my sugar intake, over when I'm getting urges to eat things. So that's maybe Paracel is something that I took. You can look into that.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that before.
Yeah, it's a really good one. So I wanted to say my one thing that I would recommend, and this goes into garnering psychic abilities and becoming empathic, is you want to understand the person that you're talking to. And it doesn't matter what they're talking about. I want to challenge every listener to find someone who doesn't agree with what you're saying. Like maybe Dan and I were talking about something that we didn't agree, but we were trying to understand one another and why we were saying the things we were saying, and how can I communicate with him if he understands that way. When you start to do that, then you're tapping into the ether. You're tapping into the greater mind that has thought all of this up. And then you can start to understand how and predict how things are going to move about if you do this reaction versus if you do that reaction. God wants to understand himself, right? Or God wants to understand itself, however someone wants to say it. So we're here experiencing this. And if we're not trying to understand everything else, then we'll never understand ourselves. And in order to understand ourselves, or in order to understand everything else, we first must understand ourselves and why we do the things that we do, how we do them, all of that. So just try to understand someone from their point of view, try to enwrap that in your mind rather than tell someone why they're wrong. Just imagine, understand it, and think about it in full, and then decide much later on when you've contemplated the superpower of contemplation and thought about it and came to a solid conclusion at that point. That's the number one way to break free out of any indoctrination.
Emmanuel, have you read or heard of a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey?
I think I have heard of it. I have not read it though.
You just wrote the chapter on, seek first to understand before being understood. It's a great book.
Yeah.
And along the same lines as Dale Carnegie's classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. These are a radical shift from the competitive dog-eat-dog American we've all been trained to be for generations, and just makes being oneself so much easier, because just like I discovered on stage, it's not about me and my performance, it's about others and helping others enjoy being them by being understood. One of our biggest needs, and you just described it, we all desperately go crazy if we feel we're not understood and heard by somebody else. So to give someone the gift of listening and understanding what they're saying, they'll fall in love with you, because they don't get that from regular people every day in life.
All right. Well, I love that, Bruce. And I'm going to say goodbye
Yeah.
to everybody. Goodbye, everyone. It was a great time. We'll talk to you later.
I love all of you.
I love you all.
Love y'all.